Okay, this is for those of you who like to consider the things that people call paranormal, which I wonder if there is anything truly paranormal. But we'll see. I have not shared some of the odd experiences in my life. The balance between my extreme objectivity on one side, and maybe many of you have this, and experiences that I just can't explain. A lot of people believe in ESP or inspiration from outside the brain. Who knows? I know that in my experience, there seems to be a kind of connection to the beauty in the universe. I sense it like a beautiful music that I can't hear it, but I feel it. It's so beautiful and so loving that it brings tears to my eyes. And the way I define that objectively is that I say that it's how our reflective abilities handle experience. You know, we feel our life, and then we reflect on it, and those reflections, those abilities to reflect, which I call empathy and objectivity and creativity, these abilities we have, they connect us to virtue. And to me, virtue and love and beauty for a human being all come together. And so in a sense, I think the idea of a muse could be just that communication between these reflective abilities we have, which are wondrously beyond our full conception. They're very social in nature, you know, and do connect to evolution, an objective view there. But in the course of this kind of connection, I've found some odd sorts of experiences, and maybe you can relate to some of these. I don't believe that there's any of the common conceptions of God make much sense to me. And I think if you're going to claim something like that, you need evidence, and I don't see that evidence. Same thing for ghosts and lots of other things. However, that isn't to say that I rule out the possibility of something. I just think that perhaps the definitions that people give are they're not cohesive with what we know, and they seem to be more psychologically based than they are based in anything that I would call objective reality. Nevertheless, in states where I have been moved like this, I have, according to some witnesses, been able to speak with knowledge about their lives that was both intricate and precise, and things that I could not possibly have known. This was in a religious context. I've never been attracted to the idea of being a psychic. But, yeah. So I don't know what to make of that. I have come to the conclusion that I just don't know. And maybe I'll never know. I think there are natural ways to explain those things away. Pure chance. Can't rule it out. Although it was beyond chance, I think. But how do we know what actually happened? But the problem that you run into, too, is, there's a sense of relationship, and I think that's because we're a human being. And it's, in yoga, they talk about Brahman and the Atman, and then they say they're the same. Atman, like a drop of water in the ocean, which is Brahman. When you realize that, then you're enlightened. Right, that's their version. The Buddha has another one, but we'll go into that another time. But this is how it feels, and I think that's why people have this idea of a God or something like that. I have had times when, like a knock on the door, a short communication comes through, telling me something that's going on at a distance, or something that might occur. And I could tell the stories, but I don't know if that's appropriate. I mean, it's so easy for a human being to be swept away by emotion. And I don't want to emotionalize this too much. But there does seem to be something going on that we don't fully grasp. And I am intrigued with the idea of the Vedas that there is that reality is, in a sense, intelligent in some way. Not that it's a kind of personal kind of intelligence like we're familiar with, but a kind of beauty, a kind of harmony that is innate, and that there is communication going on. And that we're a part of that. I'm intrigued with that idea. I don't know that it's true, but it intrigues me. And I think my summation of all of this is that it's all right to have those experiences. Just don't draw conclusions from it that you're talking to a literal Jesus or a Buddha or something. And try not to reach out there and provide context that you have no proof for. Just experience the thing. And so I'm liking some of the one statement in the Tao Te Ching which says that those that know don't speak, and those that speak don't know. What in the Vedas say something similar. So my view is that there is a process whereby you do have some of these experiences, or are likely to have some of these experiences, that do not go beyond reason and rationality and impose contexts that are inappropriate or unprovable. And that process to me, it's a joining between how we experience life and how we reflect on it. And of course that's fed by people around. And of course everybody's a little different. Some people are a little more emotionally intelligent. Some of us are just average. So there's a connection to that. There is a connection to that. In addition, I will try to address the concept of evil. And evil to me means it comes from what happens to us when we're very defensive and askew in our relationship between those reflective abilities and how we feel. That communication is off, so that we're maybe not that empathetic, or we maybe not that objective, or we're not that creative, or we're not good at blending these things together so that we do something that's objective but not caring. This sort of thing. And when that's off, that's about the closest thing I can call evil. But evil implies a judgment. And my judgment is that that can be corrected or healed. And when I'm talking about healing, in this sense, I'm inspired by the great Arthur Janoff and Bruce Wilson and a few other smart people that I've talked to over the years. And I have my own interpretation of those concepts, and what I see that damages that connection in people, and that also stunts the growth of these things, is in general terms a damaged faith in love, a damaged faith that you're going to get your needs met, to the point in certain experiences, or an accumulation of experiences, in which you feel helpless, hopeless. That kind of damage is what I see affects how people are, how well they communicate between the empathy, the source of their goodness, their objectivity, the source of their sense of truth, and their connection to creativity, which is the ability, the art of appreciating everything, which includes a kind of musical view of the world, if you want to say, artful view, a view from many perspectives, Yeah, all of that. So these virtues of art, goodness, and truth are these coming from these reflective abilities. And when we're damaged, we have a little trouble pulling that together. So I've just talked about what that damage is. And you could call it learned helplessness in a sense, but actually it's an imposed helplessness by our environment. Would be a better way to say that. It's not, you can learn it in a sense over time, but that's not really what I'm talking about. It's imposed. Nobody chooses to feel helpless. And it's not something that learning has a whole lot to do with in the normal sense of what you think of with learning. You can define it in a way where it does, but what I would say is that people run into situations where they're helpless, and how does that affect people? Well, when you feel helpless to get your needs met, or you're having an awful experience, a traumatic experience, the experience of extreme deprivation, these kinds of things where you feel helpless produce feelings that are in touch with a reality which is helpless. It's not a choice. No one chooses to get into those situations. It's imposed. So the source of quote-unquote evil is not the person. It's the environment, and I guess if there's another problem, I suppose there could be a genetic problem or an epigenetic problem, which means on top of genetics, having to do with the methylation of cells. But moving beyond that and communicating in a way which I hope anybody can understand. When we feel helpless, how do we deal with that? Well, we're human. Human beings have intricate brains. It isn't always the size, but it's certainly that plays into it, where we have a lot of synapses, a lot of possible connections, a lot of neurons, organized in a certain way. And what that allows for a human being is to change an experience of helplessness into an artificial struggle, which relieves the anxiety, which is a kind of pain inside. It relieves the anxiety of that feeling of helplessness, which no mammal can stand. They'll sicken or die in the case of studies of mice and rats. But we won't go there. But yeah, some of you are animal lovers. Okay, I get that. But I'm not going to venture into that. Human beings can turn things into a struggle or into a recapturing of the event, a lie, basically. If you are afraid of you have a real fear that you feel helpless to confront, that can change into a fear of, rabbits or whatever, and something you can control. So control is the thing. And the ability to change that helplessness into something you can control is something that human beings can do. And quite frankly, those human beings who couldn't died out. We are the result of an evolution connected to pain, anxiety, extreme anxiety, helplessness, hopelessness. We are born from that. We're remarkable creatures. Of course, other creatures perhaps also to some degree. What that means is that it's not someone's choice that they are acting in ways that are harmful to themselves or others. It's not their choice. And to go back, the only way to fix it is to go back and relive the helplessness, the hopelessness in a safe context. And I have to define that. That means you have a certain context of reality, and you can feel a layer of that helplessness that you may have that more directly connects to your present reality, which means more present kinds of stresses have to be resolved first. All right? You're starving to death and you don't have a job, for instance, that's going to get in the way. So it's complicated, but you have to deal with that, and then you have to deal with what connects below that, because these symbols that we're chasing after or avoiding or whatever, they connect to that helplessness, and they have an influence on our life. And the later that this kind of helplessness occurs, the less impacting it is. The most difficult thing to feel, for instance, would be something before you had language to express what happened. And I do believe such memory exists, and there is evidence for this. Despite the myelination of cells theory, despite that, there is learning and memory that is earlier. And I think in part because of this, what I call a feedback loop between the original impact, the actual helplessness and its circumstances, and the false communication that's given. Why is it a feedback loop? Because it never satisfies. You can't solve things symbolically. It doesn't work. It's always a temporary fix, and under enough pressure comes back. So that's where greed comes from. You can't fill up on symbols. So you want more and more and more and more in some cases. Or a repetition again and again and again of something that's very symbolic. Never gets resolved. And that would be my definition of neurosis, for instance. Psychosis being an overload, probably from very early pain. Harder to treat. And possibly needing chemical intervention. So I'm not getting all new agey on you here. I'm promoting things that are out of league with modern medicine entirely. But medicine they're beginning to make more and more connections to this. Part of those connections that they make, they refer to it as ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and its relationship to disease. Okay, so it's beneficial to relive the helplessness that you've had in your life under safer conditions, and therefore unlearn that helplessness, disconnect that helplessness. The message goes all the way through as it was. And if you're stable, then you go, oh, I'm okay now. That's in the past. And to feel the past as it was, it puts it into the past. And out of present alert. Because these symbolic things are constantly alerting you, and it's bad for your health. Very bad for your health. So, yes, it's good to feel those things, but it's not a choice. There are only two ways you can deal with that learned helplessness or hopelessness. Only two ways. One is to surprise your very intricate defense mechanisms. Because remember, the brain does not want you to connect. It's learned that this could be dangerous. It could be sickness or death. So it's fighting this process, and no matter how smart you are, this trumps it. Talky cures ain't gonna get you there. Okay, so you have to surprise that defense system so that the person's on the edge and their defenses, and out comes the feeling. That's called, in Genovian terms, a primal, a kind of connective catharsis. It's not just a mere abreaction. If you get all angry in a symbolic way, but if it's not being connected and resolved, what you're doing, two things. The brain is becoming more capable of defending against feeling what really happened. That defense mechanism improves. And, so you don't get anywhere. And it actually damages the ability to get somewhere. So you have to surprise the system, and the only way you're going to do that is with a highly trained individual who's also been through the process. You can talk to Bruce Wilson, who that might be, but yeah. And the other way would be to wear down the defenses, and not the best choice in some ways, but it is a choice. And for those who can't afford that kind of help, then wearing down the defenses can work. It's just something I have a system for doing that. Reluctant to promote it outright, but there's a possibility that it could contend with the other approach and be more easily integrated into the present psychological understandings. And easier to administer, but I would say be slower and more crude, which not exactly what you want to do with your brain, but it's the brain's pretty hardy, and we have yet to compare the approaches in a meaningful way and see what the results are. Okay, and in case I'm losing you a little bit here, let's go back to evil. Do people choose to be evil? No, they don't. Can people just choose to be healthy? Not really. They're going to need help. They're going to need to be surprised. That can happen spontaneously in some cases. Something comes along in your life and you feel it, and those old feelings come up and you resolve it. It happens, but it's very rare. The other is to wear it down gradually. So that's my inner yoga approach, because it connects those reflective abilities to your emotional core. It's, it's important. It makes you a better person. The process, as I see it overall, first of all, it's not anybody's fault. So that should bring out compassion in everyone. Nobody does bad things because they naturally want to. They're compelled to. It's an addiction. And you can stop addictions, get better human doings, but you really haven't created better human beings. And I see that problem in our justice system, where sometimes we create better human doings, but not really better human beings, which is preferable. You need to heal that, the source of things, to create better human beings. And how does the course of that go? Well, although it's not a once over lightly treatment, you have to go through this at deeper levels over time. But you have to feel that helplessness, feel what happened to you, before you can know what you've lost clearly. You have to know what you've lost in order to grieve that and let it go. So there's another process involved. You have to grieve and let go before you can truly forgive from your heart yourself and others involved in that situation. And you have to forgive before you can feel that next more difficult thing. The way that the hurt in you caused you to hurt other people. But the bright spot is when you reach that point of remorse at whatever level, you are no longer the person who did those things to yourself and others. Or you are certainly less of being that person. And it's a permanent achievement. You go through this process many times, and you get better and better. But the justice system that we have, insists that people change, but not follow through this procedure. And that doesn't work. You get better human doings sometimes, but the person isn't really ready to feel the full impact of how they hurt others until they felt the hurt in themselves. So there's a process there. And with that, I'm going to sum it. I think I've summed up most of my thoughts on these issues. Yeah. And I don't dwell into the so-called paranormal, because always there are contexts applied that doesn't make any sense. You could see it so many different ways. For instance, you desire a thing to happen. How do you know that this was, answered by the universe or something, and things have gone your way? Hard to believe that, isn't it? Or you were just in touch with what was going to happen anyway. So it gets crazy like that. So you can't define it. But there's a beautiful experience there that's worth having. You truly are a drop in the ocean of reality. And let me end this by saying, you are the hero, the star in the movie of your life. And to that part of you that is creative, above your timeline, that's how you're viewed. Struggling against things inside you, struggling against things that come at you, or that have happened to you. But always the hero. Always wonderful, and always deserving of love. And from that perspective, all people are deserving of love. And those who are even temporarily beyond our help are a challenge that can make us all better. When I say these things, I think of this word namaste, because that is a way of greeting or saying goodbye that says, that part of me that's a drop in this ocean, in some sense, a part of it honors that same in you. So I'll end with that word, namaste.